Greg on the mic, bring the facts. Erin in the ring, no turning back. Koby got the numbers clean and clear. Experts in the mortgage space right here. Housing issues, yeah, we dig deep. Every word weigh when the stakes don't sleep. Credit war, you can feel that charge. Every point hit hard, every stance large. Capital Hill, that pressure stay high. Consolidation makes the small ones fight. Servicing trails, every detail counts. Say it plain, then we write it out. No surrender.
Are we really back?
We really are.
Is this not the best part of all of our weeks?
Yes.
Man,
I hope the show goes better than the production, the pre-show.
What a shit show. Oh my goodness.
It was rough.
People only knew what we're dealing with here.
I think that should be a whole separate like BTS where we like put the whole pre-show. Like we started doing that with the production, but I think people would really like to see those 15 minutes before we start and see what a mess it is.
Oh my goodness. Then we'd have to behave ourselves. Erin's internet has been not working, blurry. She had to reboot. I'm dealing with a new computer that is not behaving that well because mysteriously on my trip that I just returned from, my computer stopped working when my IT department opened it up. It was soaking wet inside. Of course, the kids have no idea what happened, right?
Yeah, I think I know what happened. I think
they're so honest. You've been
downloading too much Doom porn.
Right.
What would Logan say?
I know. Well, we're going to talk about Doom porn for sure today. But first, we have to talk about how cute my new dog is. How cute is Maple? In all seriousness, I mean, have you ever seen a cuter dog? She looks like a stuffed animal. She's 7 months old, and she's an absolute tyrant. You have to watch her at all times. Puts everything in her mouth. It's very dangerous.
Sounds a lot like you.
Well, that's a great point. Thank you. That's a show for another day. That's Doom porn 2.0. So we'll get to that.
The ultimate Doom porn.
Yeah. So somehow we got into a conversation earlier about pantries. So just at the last minute, like 2 hours ago, we all took pictures of our pantries. And it's pretty interesting here. Who would guess, if you had to guess whose pantry is whose. Actually, you can see on the left, the dark wood. That's one pantry. Then the one in the middle is another one. And then the one on the right is just an absolute shit show. Very interesting. They're all very different. Koby's is on the left. Erin's is in the middle. Look how neat and organized this pantry is here. I mean, what is going on the third row down? Are those trash bags? What?
No, those are my Yetis. Those
is
are
that
my
yarn?
Yetis that are too tall.
Okay. Very barren. I mean, you have more alcohol than you have everything else on top.
Anybody who knows me should not be surprised by this.
And how do you get to that anyway? You're not that tall.
Well, that's because that's my third reserve. I have my liquor collection, and then I have 2 reserve collections, and then that's my third reserve for if I'm really desperate.
Got it. And you see mine on the far right is it's a catastrophe. And that's after, our nanny cleaned it up. So I don't know. I mean, it's between the kids.
As big as my bedroom.
Yeah. My nanny's coming later today to clean mine. That's why mine's such a mess. The nanny just hasn't gotten there yet. Or the guy mowing my lawn might come in and sort it out for me.
I know.
All the same person.
It's all the same person. Well, it's good to see the three of you. We have a lot of ground to cover today, as usual. There's so much going on. Road to Housing Act that maybe won't be. Alan Greenspan dies at par at 100. We've got Fine Happy States, Doom porn, AI in the courtroom, FHFA, rewrites duty to serve, war, no war, why rates aren't following oil, Fitch downgrading home builders, HUD cuts 14 FHA rules. I mean, this thing is chocked full of what's that, Erin?
I don't know.
What was that?
I'm being dramatic.
Yeah. Boom. A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to start here. This is where we're starting. What do you think, Koby? Take it away. What are we looking at?
Yeah, well, that is the current acting director of national intelligence who was, the word I love to use, bloviating about the road to housing bill. And of course, mentioned Biden in it because that's relevant. This was a bill that had, kind of a false start yesterday. It came with a lot of fanfare. Everybody was very excited about it. I was not among those big fans. But Pulte obviously was, even though it's pretty clear he didn't really read the bill. This was touted as CNN and the Wall Street Journal both touted it as one of the most progressive and far-reaching housing bills of our generation. And I'm not sure why they drank the Kool-Aid on this, but the bill really did not have a lot of meat on the bones. It offered a lot of what I would call feckless demand side solutions, most of which won't have any impact on the housing crisis. It offered no real supply side other than the institutional ban on investors from owning more than 350 homes, even though we know that that's a tiny, tiny segment of the market to begin with. So no real meat there. It was a midterm election play, in my opinion. And then it gets to the White House for the big signing, and the president decides to hold it hostage over a voter ID Act, which is another Hail Mary to try to turn the tide in November. And so it's this double whammy thing of, let's put a bill out there that really doesn't do anything and get some voters to perhaps think the GOP cares about housing. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to make sure that we tack a voter ID bill on top of it to really tilt the scales. So overall, just where this sits, in my opinion, is we really need local, state, city, municipality. Those are the reforms that we really need to move the needle on housing. And I would point to the FHA 14 things that they did, but that's a separate conversation. But this was a bill that had a lot of fanfare to it. It had a lot of finger pointing at kind of the wrong people as far as the institutional investors go. And a lot of solutions, in my opinion, really go nowhere and do nothing. But Congress at least is talking about housing, so maybe that's a good thing.
Erin, he's pretty negative on this. How about you? You're a glass half full kind of person, so I'm sure you've gleaned a thing or two that you liked out of it, right?
Absolutely. And I would just like to say, here's my shocked face at Coby clutching his pearls. So there are a couple good things in here. It opens up FHA appraisals to licensed, not just certified. It's got the rule for manufactured homes not having to be on the permanent chassis. And also for crazy libertarians like myself, we're very happy about the central bank digital currency ban, even though it's only till 2030. Coby's right, though. There's not a lot to it, but where I do want to give shout out and praise is, of course, to the MBA legislative and lobbying team, because there were some things in here that could have been bad. The way the bill was written, it actually would have lowered the FHA multifamily. Obviously, the build to rent, the 7-year dispense rule on there, and a few other items. So, shout out to MBA for getting things fixed and making sure that the final bill that was passed was not going to have any bad unintended consequences. And there are a few good things here. But yeah, a lot of it is things that they're trying to fix, to Coby's point. A lot of it really just needs to be at the state and local level. And it's not going to do anything to truly make a meaningful impact on affordability.
FHA small dollar mortgages, a pilot to expand FHA-backed loans under $100,000, plus a CFPB study on why the points and fees threshold choked the segment. So there could be a change there. And then LO comp back in the conversation. This is what this is what I'm most pleased to see. And this is a lot of Bob Brokesmith's doing and everyone else that lobbies on behalf of the Mortgage Bankers Association. The bill directs the CFPB to study how loan origination compensation practices affect the availability of small dollar mortgages. Erin, you're on the inside of the MBA. How impactful could that be?
Well, if you remember, there was the EO that came out as well. Same thing, looking at. So this is basically is kind of similar to what was in the EO, at least as far as I understand. But MBA this is one of their top priorities, is working with the CFPB on getting LO comp. So it's just more conversation around the fact that we need to look at LO comp rules, so it can't hurt.
Yeah. So I talked to Scott Olson, who runs the another great trade group, Community Home Lenders, just moments ago, and I asked him about the technicalities around this bill, because it was thought that it was presented by Speaker Johnson to the president, which starts a clock of 10 days. And because they're in session for longer than 10 days, he doesn't have options to veto. But now we learn that the bill has not been presented to the president. And so that opens up a whole Pandora's box for what's possible. He truly has leverage. And they say, whoever, that Speaker Johnson and the president are not in cahoots. But come on, give me a break.
Give me a break. Come on.
It's a technicality. Hey, don't hand me that bill. We don't want the clock to start. It's his handpicked guy. I mean, this is really, really unfortunate that homeowners and the housing market is being held hostage. We are now the ransom note for the president's own agenda around elections.
Well, and it's just going to end up shooting him in the foot. I do not understand this move at all. Elizabeth Warren is already out there saying Democrats are trying to help, Republicans aren't. Remember that in the midterms.
I'm not sure it matters. Again, I don't have a lot of, yes. First of all, to Erin's
Of
point,
course it
I do.
matters. What
I
kind
do.
of comment is that? Of course it matters. It matters
I'll
to
tell
whom?
I'll tell you why it doesn't matter. Because yes, I like the manufactured housing rule in here. I do think that opens up some possibilities. But aside from that, if this bill passes or doesn't pass, it doesn't really change anything about the housing market as it stands today. So to me, I don't think we're being held hostage. I think the president is starting to look a little bit foolish that this is a bill he advocated for and now he won't sign it. But aside from that, is this going to change how we do business in the next 6 months, whether it passes or not? Not likely.
Well, Coby, what would move your needle?
Supply side solutions. Number one.
What could have happened that would have made you optimistic that you just made the comment that in the next 6 months it's not really going to impact anything? I mean, short of saying tomorrow we're removing mortgage insurance premiums or giving some kind of a sunset and LLPAs are waived for first-time home buyers, right? Which can't happen overnight either, I don't think. But like, what could
Some of that could.
Okay, isn't it all going to take some time?
Everything takes time in terms of providing real solutions. Some things can be done quicker than others. My point, though, is that whether this bill gets signed into law or not is not going to move the needle on housing. And that was my issue with it. It was mostly pageantry for the midterm elections. I stand by that. Yes, there are some more positive things in there. There's nothing really negative, but there's nothing in there that's really so impactful that it changes the scope of what the affordability crisis looks like right now and what buyers are looking at in terms of their outlook on purchasing a home in the next 1 to 2 years. So it doesn't do anything, is my point. A study for LO comp? Well, great. We've been talking about it for a while. Let's keep studying it.
Well, it seems like it's going to happen though now. It seems like it's getting close. It's more in the conversation. I mean, this act came from the president's orders for there to be all these things looked at. And you have to admit, whether you like the changes or not, there are a lot of items here on the agenda, and it did happen relatively quickly. So, that gives me hope that on the LO comp side, and I like the small loan amounts. I think that there are a lot of people out there that have small loans that are ignored largely because lenders can't make enough money. No one's doing this for free. But the bigger question before we move on is, what does this say to the housing industry? What does this say to us? Like, what should be our takeaway here that we're being used as pawns?
Well, I don't know that it's aimed at us specifically being used as pawns. I think we just happen to be the ones up and the ones that are able to do it. But I think at the end of the day, this is just going to make Trump look really, really bad.
Yeah. So like when you look at the report card, almost 2 years in, like a year and a half in, when you look at what has or hasn't happened in housing, when you look at the LLPA changes that Barry Habib said were coming, that turned out to, they haven't even happened yet, right? And that was going to be around just refis and second homes. Did that never happen, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, like we were hoping that we would get some incentives for first-time home buyers, but we know that the administration, it seems like, is hell-bent on and driving as much revenue to that top line as possible. So when you take all of that and the ineffectiveness and inaction, and then you marry it with this moment, I think if you're in housing, you cannot be a fan of this administration at the moment.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's hard to be a fan of this administration in general, but certainly when it comes to housing, have they talked about housing much more and in a much more positive and much more real way than the previous administration? Yes, I'll give them that. And I know people think I have, Trump derangement syndrome. I saw that in the comments after last week's episode, but I'm looking at reality. And the reality is that this administration does a lot of talking about affordability in general, about housing affordability, about moving the needle, about making America a better place to live. I keep getting told my 401k is doing better than it ever has in the history of 401ks. But the reality is it's all talk. Nothing really gets done. The effort is to elect more Republicans. It's not really to make America a better place for those that are struggling. And we keep seeing that in the K-shaped economy. That K is getting bigger and bigger and bigger every week.
And it goes back to when Trump, how many times have we had the Lucy pulling the ball from Charlie Brown moment where he was supposed to make all of these big speeches and announcements and in Davos and all of this. And all he came out and said was, I have zero intention of doing anything to impact property values and make them go down. And that is the one thing that could absolutely help affordability the most. And it's the one thing he said he absolutely refuses to do. And so I don't think he is serious at all about this unless it's something that can make him look great.
I think what happens is, and to Erin's point, I think he sees that when he starts to talk about anything that might bring home values down a little bit, he starts to get pushback from congressmen who are like, wait, those homeowners are the stalwarts of my constituency, and those are the people that reelect me. And if I piss them off, that's going to open the door for a primary challenger. I think he gets that pushback, and then he starts to walk back whatever answers he has for the housing industry. And I think that's what's going on.
I mean, the one constituency he has left are the Fox News boomers, and those are the ones that would be hurt the most by falling property values.
100%.
All right, let's pivot into another legacy of a 100-year-old man who's no longer with us. Let's take a look.
One of the problems that surprised me when I got into public life was that open, clear talk often creates problems.
In 2007, there were serious worries about a financial bubble. Greenspan's response?
When you get bubbles like this, there is no way of diffusing them until the speculative fever breaks on its own.
Soon after came the 2008 financial collapse, and Greenspan's reputation quickly reversed. He was widely criticized for having allowed the housing bubble.
Financial bubbles are super disruptive, and to ignore them is a big mistake. And Greenspan made that mistake, and that is where I fault him.
But when he appeared before a House committee in 2008, Greenspan sort of admitted that he'd put too much trust in markets to self-correct.
Those of us who have looked to the self-interest of lending institutions to protect shareholders' equity, myself especially, are in a state of shocked disbelief.
All right, Greenspan died at 100 years old from complications from Parkinson's. He was the 13th Fed chairman and served 19 years from 87 to 2006. I don't think that'll ever happen again. It's so politically charged, the position now. Appointed by Reagan, reappointed by presidents of both parties. They called him the maestro. Erin, starting with you, how should Alan Greenspan be remembered?
As a traitor to his initial philosophy. He, in 1966, wrote a paper that was published in an Ayn Rand publication talking about how great the gold standard was, that we needed to be on the gold standard to prevent excesses of a central bank. And here is just a small excerpt from it. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. He understood what happens when a central bank played with the system, when the markets were not allowed to correct themselves. And so he started his career like this. And then he ended with something called the Greenspan put, which is when the markets knew that he would rush to them and he would inject liquidity into the system. He would lower interest rates to basically save them. And that did two things. One, it encouraged excessive risk taking because there was minimal to no downside for the risk takers. And number two, it created inflation. And inflation is the absolute most insidious tax that we have ever put on, and it has robbed our children of their future. And so I look at Greenspan as somebody who got it at the very beginning of his career. He understood and then just completely betrayed it by the end. And I'm going to read a quote by the great Ron Paul, specific in regard to this. I get the sense that I am listening to the chairman of the board of Central Economic Planning rather than the chairman of the board that has been entrusted with protecting the value of the dollar. And that's all I have to say.
Well, first of all, it's hard to find a picture of Alan Greenspan where he doesn't look 100 years old. But, to everything Erin just said, I agree with. The single thing I've been hearing people talk about this week, and we've talked about it, is when interest rates were at 1%, which was part of the Greenspan put after the dot-com bubble burst. And he encouraged Americans to go out and get an ARM loan and said, maybe we're paying too much by going for a 30-year fix, and Americans are probably costing themselves money by not getting an ARM loan. And then, people went out and did what he advised. And then over the next, I forget how many months it was, but raised interest rates from 1% to 5.25%, which was a persistent rate hike quarter after quarter after quarter. Now, did he encourage investors to ingest no income, no asset and stated income loans and all that kind of garbage that led to the bubble, or at least helped the bubble burst? No, but he did give some advice that was ill-timed, that he later regretted. His approach to the markets, having the belief that the banks would do what was in the best interest of the consumers and essentially self-regulate. Those beliefs did not age well. His advice did not age well. So it's a complicated legacy. But earlier in this week, we talked about this, and I called his career remarkable. You have to, remarkable doesn't necessarily mean great. It just means of note. 18, 19 years under 4 presidents, from Reagan to George W. Bush and a Democrat in between there. Just, an amazing run. Changed the job forever. Like you said, Greg, we're not going to see that again. We're not going to see somebody sitting in that job across 4 presidencies. It's become a highly politicized position. But what he did do, he did help us recover from some other things earlier in his career. I think the 87 stock crash or the Black Monday, I think he was instrumental in righting the ship after that. It just seemed like as he
went down a massive amount in a 24-hour period.
Yeah,
right?
just
then he calmed fears and it bounced right back.
He did. So a lot of things that he did earlier in his career, there's an argument to be made that later on in his career, where we talk most about what his checkered past around that, there's an argument to be made that he may have gotten away from his initial core beliefs, and that's what led to this complicated past. But certainly somebody that has his fingerprints on our industry today in many of the same ways that Barney Frank did. So what a couple of months we've had, losing 2 people that have had such a tremendous impact on our business.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was soft-spoken in the beginning and then became more outspoken as he went along. And there seems like there's some kind of star power that goes along with that position. Now we have Warsh that's looking more like Greenspan did in the beginning, wanting to stick to few words and not stoke any flames out there. So I think what it does underscore, though, is the importance and sensitivity of the position and the power behind it. And so, there's more scrutiny now than ever, and I think it's deserving. I mean, he did call, he said there wasn't a bubble; it was froth, right? And of course, you spoke to the arms speech. So, I mean, certainly he gave. Anytime someone gives their life to that length and tenure of service, you got to tip your cap to them, and no body of work is perfect for any of us.
But was the tenure too long? I mean, to your point, where you get consumed with that power, you get consumed with what you can do, and he had a much better start than a finish. So is that tenure too long? Did he serve too long? And now granted, we're dealing with a lot of inflation from the CARES Act and all of that, but he created an inflationary pressure. He created an environment where we encourage risk taking. We injected liquidity into the system when we shouldn't have necessarily done that. And so, sometimes maybe the tenure's too long.
Well, how long should the tenure be?
I don't know the number to that, but his tenure, I would say is too long.
Coby, anything before we get to fine, happy states?
No, let's go.
All right, let's do it. Oh, that's not it. See, now you're always counting on me, Erin, to have some kind of a mishap here, and so I have done that.
It would not be an episode of No Surrender without it.
This is probably going to be. Oh, here we go. Well, this is just terrible highlighting. Who's I don't want this person, doing surgery on me. Good Lord,
it's
this Coby's work.
It's probably the same person whose pantry looks like a disaster, I would guess.
All right, what's going on here? Coby?
So we certainly know about the gutting of the CFPB under this administration. We know they're 2/3 less the employees they were. They've basically been given a cease and desist order, for lack of a better term. And a lot of the regulatory oversight has now shifted to the states, and that is becoming the problem that many of us thought it might become, which is the states are after the money and they're not really after working with mortgage lenders in a supervisory and cooperative way. Many make that claim about the CFPB, but at least with the CFPB, you had one body to deal with. The issue here is that some of the states, and particularly New York and California, surprise, surprise, that have become extra onerous on some of these lenders. The fear is that when you have a centralized body like the CFPB, well, yeah, you deal with it, but it doesn't affect your decisions as far as how to deploy resources and where to lend and where to do business. When you have an issue like this, and Mark McArdle talked about it as I think it was basically a revenue play. Excessive fines for relatively minor offenses is what he says here. It starts to determine where banks do business. And if you're an IMB and you're in growth mode and you're thinking about, should I open an office in California or should I open an office in Texas? And I have to make a decision because I can only deploy so many resources with so much money. I'm going to default to the state where it's easier to do business. And then what happens to the citizens of the states if more and more banks decide, well, I'm not going to do business there? And we see that in real time in New York State. New York State has a real problem with this, and New York borrowers wind up paying more as a result. So another unintended consequence of defanging and gutting the CFPB is the fact that the states have this power, and it's causing IMBs to make decisions about where to do business and how to do business. And that's bad for the consumer, and we should be very concerned about it.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, as an IMB, we make these decisions. We look through this whenever we're trying to decide where and how to expand and what that looks like. And Mark McArdle, friend of the show, love that guy. You know, when he was with the CFPB, he actually used to hold regular calls with the state regulators and kind of talked about how we're interpreting certain statutes, certain regulations, things like that. And so it kind of gave guardrails. Like I think about like bowling, right? So it kind of let the states know, hey, this is kind of where we're looking, and it helped rein in the ones that are kind of that were going crazy on either side, right? And so I think, you know, I was a fan, or am a fan of not having a CFPB like the Chopra CFPB necessarily. But I like that we had this kind of overarching guardrails that would keep the states in line. And I think that that's important. And as somebody who, you know, with a tough CFPB or not, I still have 50 state regulators I have to deal with. The problem is now with those guardrails gone, it's just more extreme state regulators. And that makes it far more challenging to do business. And I looked up the numbers, and on the revenue thing, I think part of this is because mortgage companies are not the only ones who have suffered from originations going down and people leaving the business. There's over 100,000 fewer originators licensed now than there were in 2022. That means lost revenue for the states, because that's how states and licensing and they get their revenues. And so I absolutely think it makes sense that they're using this as a way to recapture that revenue. And if they're using increased fines and really high fines for penalties that aren't that severe, that's just another form of Chopra enforcement or regulation by enforcement.
I would take the CFPB that we had under Chopra over this.
100%. Look, the CHLA is calling for three things here that I think make a lot of sense. One, coordination and proportionality from the state regulators. Just treat us fairly and actually work on the problems. Don't try to just have us write a check. Honoring the existing CSBS multi-state cooperative agreement with 39 states. And then the third thing is for the shrunken CFPB to keep issuing interpretive guidance. So for the CFPB to, okay, if you don't have the enforcement arm, at least, you know, keep your voice up and tell us, you know, where to be, as Erin calls the bowling lane. So those are three things that I think make a lot of sense. Unfortunately, the states have no reason to listen to that, and they're still going to act out of their own self-interest. And many states, as we know, are running tight on budgets, so they look to the mortgage industry to make up that shortfall. And until we have a federal regulator that actually works with us, this is going to continue to happen. It's going to continue to get worse, unfortunately.
All right, take a look at this caption. You guys recognize that handsome face with the unmistakable full head of hair?
Who doesn't know Logan Manashami? And
is he a friend of the show? I don't know. He's
friend of the show, faux show.
Friend of the show and friend of each of us, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, I would say he's a friend.
Yeah, we're all friends with Logan.
Yeah, Logan. So he came up with this thing, doom porn. He talks about it all the time. And you know what this is the idea that we're just too negative out here in social media land, that we're telling too many of the stories of people that can't rather than can. And when we say can't versus can, we're talking about home ownership, right? And to me, there's a fine line, right? Like I think I'd probably, Logan probably reads my posts and says, there's a doomer right there. But to me, there's also reality.
Did you say
like,
doomer or boomer?
Doomer and a boomer. But you got to call it like it is. And so if it's tougher than it's ever been, if there are things that are getting in the way, I think that you don't want to obstruct that you want to be a teller of truth. Now, to the degree that it outweighs the positivity, yeah, I see that. Before we get into this, I asked my good friend Jennifer Beeston, who has talked about this a lot. She works at Rate. She is one of the top VA lenders in the world. She serves veterans to the tune of well over $200 million a year. She's just super fabulous and very passionate. She's on social media all over the place on YouTube, over 100,000 followers. And the majority of that 200 to 300 million a year comes from her YouTube channel, believe it or not. So, she is as advocate as it comes. Here's what she had to say about this idea of doomers.
What would you do if I told you the housing industry is actually killing the American dream? That's right. You can blame rates, you can blame affordability, but you know what? The blame lies on us. Why? Look at the content that's out there right now. Everybody's on social media. I've been saying it for years. You have loan officers chasing clicks by saying things like, rates are so high, no one can buy a house. Is that true? No. Does it get views? Yes. Does it get clicks? Yes. I see the videos where someone takes some statistic out of a poorly formed survey and says, oh, everybody needs money from their parents to buy a house. You have to be a rich kid. It gets clicks. It gets views. It kills the American dream. So be thoughtful with the messages you're putting out there. Personally, I don't chase clicks. I chase helping people build their dreams because that's what people are missing. Take out the math, take out the news, take out the noise. People want to be home. Show them how to get there and show them how wonderful it is once you are a homeowner. That is how we save the housing industry and the American dream.
Erin, is there a fine line or is she 100% right? Should it be all positive all the time?
No, I think it needs to be all truthful all the time. And I don't, and I think that's what she's saying, right? I think she makes some really good points there. I checked and right now the Google searches for housing crash are at an all-time high. And there's apparently I'm not on TikTok, so I did not confirm this independently, but there's apparently a whole 2026 housing crash TikTok thing that's happening. And so I do think that there is something to that the doomers are out there. They're getting clicks. I mean, my Twitter algorithm gets into that loop sometimes. Kobe's Twitter algorithm, I don't even know what it does. That's some weird stuff, but mine gets into weird housing doomer stuff. And I'm like, God, and it really is, it's crashing. We're cooked. The market is done. Stuff like that. I agree with her. It's not helpful. And it is creating a psychology within home buyers and even sellers thinking that the market's going to crash. And you see that in the Google searches. You see that in TikTok land, right? To me, I think what it needs to be is you just need to be truthful and honest, and you need to break apart the numbers. And where I think what we need to be doing is breaking apart the numbers and showing the reality of it, like looking at the jobs numbers and saying maybe they're not as rosy as what everyone thinks they are, or breaking out other numbers and saying maybe this isn't as bad as you think it is. And I think that's where we have to live. We have to live in a world of truth, and we have to live in a world where we call out the people who are too rosy or too doomy.
Mm.
I like Jennifer Beeston. I think she's a little bit confused. And I think this argument is a lot more nuanced than, whether we scare people or not scare people. And the reason it's nuanced is those aren't loan officers on YouTube and TikTok talking about rates are too high, you can't buy. Loan officers don't do that. If anything, loan officers aren't on TikTok and YouTube enough, or on LinkedIn. They're not spreading the message of what is positive about housing. The people she's seeing that are trying to get clicks, those are people trying to get clicks. They're not in our housing industry. They are there to scare people about the housing buying process. They're there to tell people that the mortgage companies are out to screw them. They're there to tell them that agents on the real estate side shouldn't get commissions because they don't deserve it. Those are not people within our industry. If anything, we are not telling the story of our industry effectively enough. Here's the bifurcation. On that side, it's that it's not the right people telling the story, and it's the people getting clicks that are spreading the bad news. When you take it to a higher level, the 30,000-foot view, what scares me about this are not those people on social media, and it's not social media in general, because we're all savvy enough at this point to know when we're getting just somebody's hot take on something. What scares me is when the Wall Street Journal puts out doom porn, when the mainstream media, the places that are supposed to be balanced and fair and honest and reporting just the facts, when they're putting out sensational headlines talking about the housing market and how bad it is and how expensive it is to own a home. I put out a post earlier this week about the Wall Street Journal putting a chart out that called principal a rising expense of home ownership when it's not that. And we see that time and again where the mainstream media is now trying to compete with social media by putting out sensationalist headlines. The lines are getting blurred between what's actually journalism and what's opinion. And that's scary because that does create misinformation and fear in the public. And that's what we need to look out for. That's the danger of the doom porn era.
Yeah. At the same time, I am with Erin. We've got to be telling the truth, because a lot of times that amplifies and ends up in the ears of people that can impact change.
Well, and I think,
so,
I think there's a perfect opportunity here for the loan officers and realtors out there who want to be that source of truth to come out and be the voice of reason, right? If we're seeing record numbers of Google searches for home ownership crashes, put the data out there. Look at foreclosure filings today compared to 2007, 8, 9, 10. Look at the amount of equity that we have compared to that period of time. It's a completely different period of time. And you're not going to see the same thing because the numbers are different. Back then, people had no equity, so they got rid of their house and kept their credit cards and car. It's probably going to be a lot different if people get into stressful times now. And so, I think that is an opportunity for us if there truly is this undercurrent of people who have been swept away by the doomers. Because I disagree with Coby. I think that, talk to a normie who's not a housing person, and I think they still do believe some of the shit that they see. And so I think this is a good opportunity for the people who want to spread the message and get it out there that it's not 2008.
I think we can all do our part to be a little bit more positive. I'm challenging myself to do that. Today I had a post. I stumbled upon a survey that Bank of America did, an actual real survey, not like the one that United veterans did, where they handpicked 200 people or 400 people, 200 of which were veterans, where they knew what the answer would be. Bank of America surveyed 100 renters, 100 people that currently owned homes. And, they asked how optimistic they are about the idea of purchasing a home. And the majority of them said they're much more optimistic than they were last year. And so I think if everyone out there with a voice leans in a little bit when we see positive things, and I'll help lead the charge, right? I'm going to make more of an effort, more of a concerted effort, because honestly, it is easy to write about negative stuff. It is easy to talk about the negative things because there's a lot of fear out there. Right. We're in such a precarious time in our industry. Nobody really knows whether we're going to go left or right, or, looking at reload.
Coby's going to go left.
Yeah. Or even if there's going to be a business out there anymore. Look at Relo, look at Pylon, look at these companies out there that are trying to originate loans without even a loan officer. Like, what happens to this whole thing? It probably all just comes crumbling down. See, I'm dooming again. You see what I'm doing? You see that? You see what I just did?
You did. You went straight to doom.
You just got a doom boner.
I did. I need to look at this. This will help it go back down. All right. AI lawsuits. Now, this is becoming a real menace, in particular for the servicers, Erin. I know you're quite fascinated by this new phenomenon of regular Joes fighting back with a couple of clicks.
Yeah, it's super interesting to me because this isn't just a mortgage. I was listening to Breaking Points on Monday morning getting ready, and they actually had a story, just generally speaking, how AI lawsuits have exploded through the whole country. And then right after that, this article came out basically saying that servicers are seeing it, where borrowers are actually like just going to ChatGPT and saying, file a lawsuit against my servicer for charging me too many fees. And so now servicers and their legal departments are having to spend time and resources responding to these. And like, I was thinking about this in show prep. I'm like, all right, let me steel man the side of the ChatGPT attorneys, right? Like, could this be good, right? It's more accessible. So maybe if a borrower, there was a $3,000 overcharge, but the borrower would normally have to pay $30K in attorney's fees. Does this make it easier for some borrowers if they've been truly wronged, right? Could this bring out some issues, some underlying issues that were previously undiscovered that need to be corrected? And I'm like, well, maybe, but like, There's so many hallucinations. There's just so many just people trying to kick the can down the road from going into foreclosure that this is just going to increase costs for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the FCRA filings that are up. It's the TCPA. Now, and if we think about how the mortgage companies, and we've done, quite extensive talking about the mortgage companies deploying AI voice agents. If we think about how that's going to be deployed, now you've got an army of voice agents on the mortgage side. Now you've got an army of ChatGPT lawyers on the other side. And the danger of not regulating the AI on our side is the fact that we're going to have these AI lawsuits being filed. And they're up 50% since the release of ChatGPT, I think Model 4 in 2023. AI lawsuits are up 50%. Now, that's not the mortgage industry. That's across the board. But that's a huge number. That means that the couch surfing of just being able to say, hey, put this lawsuit together because I just got a call from my lender that I didn't authorize and I don't have a business relationship with. And they're targeting, by the way, they're not targeting the big guys. They're targeting the smaller lenders that are going to probably make it go away by writing a check to make the nuisance lawsuit go away. So if you've got, couple that onto the pressure from the states, and, we're already down to 16 bips of profitability, despite what Open Door says. And we're looking at some.
They're liars, Coby. Yeah. You should write about that sometime.
I may just do that, but I'll do it positively. The issue that we're going to have in this country heading forward is responsible AI deployment on one side, but then we're going to have AI weaponized on the other side. And what is that going to look like? And that doesn't scare me. It's just an interesting thing that we're going to be dealing with over the next few years that I think is going to become more and more of a mainstream conversation as we get deeper in it.
I think after all these years, we finally proved Greenspan wrong, and we're realizing we have to regulate ourselves, or Greenspan right. We're finally doing right by Greenspan.
Here's the thing: we're all still trying to figure out how AI is going to land, and in this instance, it's going to cost us more.
Yeah,
because now you've got to have additional attorneys, you've got to have more staff. Now you've got to set up an army, a bunker, to be able to deflect these things and figure out what's noise and what's real, right? Because any one of these things that turns out to be real could be seismic in how it impacts these lenders who are already struggling from a rate compression standpoint. Coby just pointed out, as an industry, 16 bips is man, Coby, that's thin profit right there. At some point, what is the number that you look at and go, man, this is not worth it for all the risk I'm taking on, for all these loans, for the tail behind me that can hit me at any time over 2, 4, 6, 8 years. You got to think you want to make at least 30 basis points for that to be worth it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what the right number is, but it's certainly not 16.
No, it's not 10, which is, all this is going to do is drive that number down.
Correct.
Right. So now we got to talk about something I know absolutely nothing about. And this is what happened yesterday when Erin told me that we were going to talk about the chattel, the shattel, the shittle. I don't know.
By the way, the best part of this is before the show, Erin, when you were rebooting and Greg asked me how to pronounce the word.
You asshole. Anyway, I sent a few pictures last night on my phone. I mean, you should see the back and forth. We have the best week-long, tag team going on. We have
It's the best text thread in the industry.
If anybody ever got a hold of that thread, we would all be flipping burgers at McDonald's. Is that safe to say?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
We may be doing that anyway if we go any further down than 16 bips.
Yeah, that's true. Right. And then I'm just going to, then instead of just hiding in the backseat of my truck for promos, I'll just live back there. I'm never going to leave it. But so, Erin's like, we got to talk about the chattel. And I'm like, this is going to be my look when she starts talking about, I don't know what it did here with my nose.
What is this really picture?
It's
glorious.
I took 3 pictures and then I just, basically in saying that I'm going to freeze when Erin starts to talk about this because I have zero value to bring. But Erin, as always, you have so much to bring. So
okay, well, I love you for that. Thank you.
So yes, ma'am.
One, I have far too many group chats that if they were made public, I would be in trouble. So I keep my phone locked and near me. Also, second, seeing that picture right before I went to bed last night did wonders for my nocturnal dreams. So
for your nightmares.
Yes. Okay. So duty to serve, this came out, I think yesterday. Really just the thing I found interesting about this is FHFA is kind of scrapping their old dirty duty to serve duty to serve, which is basically just saying we have to serve the very low and low to moderate income borrower, right? That's all it is they've got to have these AMI programs, your home's, that's renovation, home ready, all that stuff. They're kind of scrapping it. It used to be very prescriptive, like you've got to do this, and this as Fannie and Freddie, making it a little more, hey, just do whatever you feel is right as long as it doesn't fall outside of the acceptable parameters. But what they're pushing on this is basically the chattel loans to basically allow you to do a loan on a manufactured home that is not real property, that is considered personal property. They've been trying to do this for years. It's been part of the duty to serve, but I don't think they've originated one single loan on it. I remember talking about this year in 2018, and they're having a renewed push through the revamping of the duty to serve to try to push this. And so are we going to be now getting into, for real, personal property loans on, on manufactured homes? So manufactured homes that are like on a mobile home lot kind of thing, and that where you don't own the land. What does that mean for the industry? And so I just thought that was worth pointing out.
So question here, and then I'm going to seem completely ignorant on this because I am. Why don't they own the land? Is it because the mobile home park owns all the land, and can that change or are they going to be giving loans on land that is not owned by the person that has the mobile home?
It's not a loan on the land. It's a loan on just the mobile home itself.
Right. And it's a personal loan, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So now the agencies are going to get involved and make it a government sponsored loan, government backed loan.
It'd be a Fannie Freddie loan.
All right. And do we think this is good for the industry? How can it not be?
I mean, it's more originations, but it's more risk. What does the pricing look like? What is the risk? What are the underwriting? What does it look like to underwrite these? So I am honestly I don't know that I have all the answers.
Well, the rates for the personal loan, as I understand it, from what little I read, are hovering around 10%. So if you take a borrower from 10% down into the sixes, obviously that's going to help more people be able to afford these.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about this is that this was both in the Road to Housing bill, as far as the manufactured housing, and this was something that Pulte was talking about. So it's kind of being talked about on two different tracks right now. And what's interesting to me about it is we've seen nothing from the GSEs over the last 2 years other than pulling away from the bleeding edge and marginal loans. And now what we're seeing them push is loans that aren't securitized by land or collateralized by land and have traditionally been much more risky. There's like a 65% denial rate to these historically. Interest rates are 3% higher than normal rates on these historically. So it's interesting to me that we're seeing this push for this kind of lending to be more prevalent when other kind of lending that has been more successful, like ITIN, we're seeing the administration walk away from that, and by extension Congress, who put the Road to Housing bill in place. So I think that's interesting to note. I'm sure if we spent some more time on it, we could break down and figure out what the political agenda was behind that. Who owns manufactured homes and whom do they typically vote for versus ITIN loans? So I think there's a bigger conversation there, and it's just interesting to see where the push for housing actually is.
Right. And it's interesting because they're pulling away from condos and leaning in on manufactured housing.
Yeah. Guess who condo voters typically vote for?
Well, the condo changes aren't coming till August, or have they already been?
There's some that start July 1st, and then the limited review August 3rd, and then the reserves on January 1st.
Yeah, I mean, any chance that gets reversed, that we can create enough pressure to turn that around? Or
I know MBA is actively having conversations through TMC. We're actively having conversations with FHFA, but so far they're not moving.
I have to say, as it relates to the MBA, that they seem to be in a groove right now.
Oh, they're killing it.
They seem to be connected to the administration. I remember talking to people inside those walls when Trump was elected, and in dealing with some of the people in the administration. Certainly not going to mention any names, but that it was really choppy and really uncertain, and the doors weren't necessarily opening as wide as they had hoped. It appears now as if they're in those rooms.
Well, look at what we've had in the last 12 months. We've had trigger leads, we've had VA partial claims, we've had road to housing, maybe, but that's still a win for MBA. And I agree. I mean, they're in all the rooms, having all the conversations, talking to Treasury, talking to everyone. And so I think they're killing it.
Fingers certainly seems to be on the pulse. I'll give them that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the war that, maybe is over. Coby was thinking maybe it's really not over. He didn't believe last week that it was over. Coby, this week, let's take a temperature check here. Do you think the war is over?
I think it's more over than it was over last week. I think we're
Got it.
closer to over than we've ever been with this
Got
war.
it.
But, this is a war that ends every week, doesn't it?
This show is great for interest rates. The 10-year is rallying beautifully right now. It's down to 4.38. We
All
were
right.
bumping
Well, look,
up against 4.7 during the war. And so oil prices have plummeted. Rates have not followed that trajectory. And I make it a part of every one of my mornings to listen to Sarah Wheeler, and most of the time, Logan Matashami. And this morning I listened to Logan talk about just how rates are not following oil and why. And so, first thing I want to do is give kudos to Housing Wire and this show that I listen to every day that I highly recommend everybody does. I am stealing this audio, but hopefully they will not sue me, as I am saying it is a must listen to, and they're my friends over there. So this is what Logan had to say this morning.
A lot of people just see oil and they think oil and the 10-year yield should move 1-to-1. Not necessarily. The market needs to lose this attitude, which it can change very quickly. You get 2 to 3 Fed governors coming out and go, okay, the worst case scenario is over for Fed rate hikes. We could maybe be neutral or stay the course and see where it goes with inflation. If they do that, that's very beneficial. But that to me is like the main reason that oil prices have been falling for like 21 days, but the 10-year yield hasn't been budging this much.
So you got to trust Logan. He's normally all over it and on it. But we're seeing now that was recorded on Wednesday morning, right? And you see how quickly things change. Like when they recorded that was before Trump had said, take all of the balloons and get them the hell out of my office. I'm not signing this act. So, and then on top of that, 24 hours later, the bond is rallying big time. So maybe coming more into line. Maybe it's becoming more believable that the war is really over and that there could be some relief. But you have to believe, Coby, like the bond did shoot up dramatically and it looked like we were heading to 5. Why didn't it go up a little bit more? Why? And we're not economists here, so let's throw that disclaimer out there. But why is it hovered around 4.5? What do people that look at this data know that we're not necessarily looking at? What are they saying in the numbers that leads them to believe that maybe the economy is not doing too well, even though we're having, lots of different conflicting data points?
Well, I think you have to look at, two things. If you're looking at the employment data, there's definitely interesting numbers coming out of that. And there's some conflicting numbers. We just saw the latest jobs report where Erin pointed out that many of those jobs were coming from the World Cup. I think if you look at it from the war perspective and oil, there's a history now. There's a track record that Trump has where he takes us to the brink of things and makes a lot of claims and a lot of threats. And then at some point, he kind of rolls it back and gets us back into what anybody would call, as normal as you can get under this administration. But what is it called? The taco? Trump always chickens out. And I think there is something to that, but not necessarily that it's out of fear. But I think at a certain point, he shifts his focus back to the voters and back to the economy and says, okay, I've got to manage this. This is my biggest responsibility, my biggest path towards getting Republicans elected in November. And I think the bond market and the bond markets control everything. The bond markets see that. They think that they have a good read on him now that we're 6 years into his presidency. And I think that they look at the jobs and where that's going and they ingest all of this information and the panic that used to be in something like launching a war just isn't there, because I think they see that the appetite for going further. I heard some people talk about, could we see ground troops by the end of the year? No, we're not going to see ground troops in Iran. That's not going to happen. And I think the bond market recognizes that. So I think the bar is low for what the jobs reports are coming in. The outlook for war is not as bad as some people think it is, even if it does drag on for a little while longer. So I think that's creating a lot of temperance in the market, and that's what's keeping the yields low, and is going to continue to. Are we going to see 5.5%? I don't think anytime soon, but could we get down to 6 in the high 5s? Yeah, I think so. I think we'll see that this year.
Interesting. You're discounting the Warsh effect. So maybe now you've really pivoted, Coby. Maybe all of a sudden you believe Warsh that he's gonna stick to the monetary policy and not cut rates knee jerk wise. I mean, what a difference a week has made. You thought the war wasn't really over. Now you think it's really potentially over. Now you don't see rates going down. You're becoming a believer in Warsh. I mean, next thing your pantry is going to be perfectly clean. It's going to look like Erin's pantry.
I gave you what I think the bond market outlook is. And and that's who really controls things. That may be, there is some conflict between what they believe and what I believe. But I think, they're obviously the ones making the decision, not me.
But his behavior can dictate what Warsh does, the way he tries to encourage, although he's not the one, right? It's a whole board, but I'm just teasing you, buddy.
I get it. I'm good.
Well, and now the bond market is realizing it's not going to get its forward guidance, and it needs to actually look at the data and ingest the data and make decisions on its own. I mean, we did get up to 4.7 almost with the 10-year at one point during the war. I mean, I think Coby makes a good point that at a certain point the bond market realized that Trump bloviates a lot, and a lot of it is here and there. And I think a big reason, Warsh obviously, but I also think last week it was still very tenuous, and the market doesn't like volatility and uncertainty. And I think we've had a little more certainty and less volatility, and I think it's calming down just a little bit still. And that also looks good. If we're not going to continue war, then that's not additional war spending that is going to continue to drive things up. So,
well, speaking of volatility, I hate to be a doomer here, but we're going to take a look at this Fitch downgrade of U.S. home builders to deteriorating. Erin, this was really important for you to bring up this week. Why so important? I mean, isn't this just more of the same, or is there something more substantive here that we should look at?
Well, I think we just had some data that came out that kind of aligned with the downgrade for U.S. home builders to deteriorating. So in the last week or so, we had I think it was NAHB Wells Fargo survey come out and state that up from 32% last month, this month, 35% of home builders had to cut their price, and over 62% had to give incentives. And if you remember, the reason these builders are giving incentives, doing forward commitments, things like that, is so they don't have to cut the price. And so now builders are still giving incentives. It's been more than 60% for 15 plus months in a row now are giving incentives, but now you have an increasing number also cutting prices. And those two, that math don't math for builders. And so I think what we're seeing.
Did I read that builders had something like 10 months of supply in the market right now?
So, some as much as 13 or 15, depending on the market.
But we have a shortage, right?
Well, those are two different things.
Huh.
There's a shortage in the existing home sales.
Well, I mean,
market.
those homes are empty, aren't they, though?
They are, but they're out of reach for most home buyers because builders can't afford to build less expensive homes. Okay. So we have a glut of expensive homes that most American families can't afford.
I don't know. I mean, we seem to be going through a wealth wave right now with, if we're to believe it, stocks and 401ks higher than they've ever been. I don't know if that maths totally.
Well, what percentage of people are in the market though? That number is deceiving in and of itself.
To the better or the worse? What's the point?
Meaning that number is rosy. So that's a big talking point for the Trump administration, that the stock market is higher than ever. But if you look at the number of people that are actually invested in the stock market, it's shockingly low. And that's where you get your pay.
A lot of
by the way, the builders themselves are would rate themselves deteriorating. This is builder confidence. It fell 35 in June from 37, the 14th straight month below 40. And that's a run not seen, by the way, since 2011, 2012. And certainly not a good era for the builders. So if you compare anything back to like 2010, 11, 12 for the builders, that's by default not a good comparison and not a good outlook for them.
Yeah. So what happens, Erin, if that inventory balloons from 10 months to 14 to 16, and then they start cutting and losing, and the builders start losing, and that ripples through the economy, and now values start to go down? Like you were talking, one of you was talking earlier in this show about some TikTok channel where people are predicting a crash of the housing market. I mean, could that be a catalyst? See, I'm dooming again. You see what
No,
happened?
but
to me?
I don't think it's a catalyst. I think that's where you actually get people. I think that's where you actually improve affordability, and where people can actually start to afford to buy homes again. And so I think that's actually would be helpful.
But we don't want to put the builders
affordability.
out of business, though. We don't want to put the builders out of business.
No,
So
no, we
that's
don't.
why we need reform when it comes to the regulatory costs of building a home, so that $100,000 of cost is not baked into the process, so the builders can actually build homes that people can afford and make money. Because if we put the builders out of business again, which we did during the Great Recession, that's going to make the housing shortage even worse than it is right now, because that's what started it.
Yeah, well,
So
then
do
we
it-
need to be advocating at the state and local level for those,
Yep.
for those fixes.
Coby, do we need to be building more right now based on the numbers we just talked about?
We need to be building better. We're not building. We're not
build
building
back
necessarily
better.
more. We need to build back better. We need better.
Yeah,
we need more affordable
we need
homes.
to build more. You're saying we need to build lower price point homes, but the prices are coming down every day on these houses now. So isn't affordability getting better? Shouldn't that stock be getting eaten up?
No, because it's still not to the point where most Americans can afford it. They're still building way too expensive of a home, because that's the only point where the profits make sense, is if they build something that the average American can't afford.
Can't you say can't afford it, but on a $400,000 home, where
But they're not
today's
building
interest rate-
$400,000
well,
homes.
Well, $500,000 home, 600. Let's call it $600,000 home. Okay, with all the buy downs, you can get all your closing costs covered, and even though today's prevailing rate is 6.5, you could potentially get 499.
Yeah.
So really, what you're buying is the equivalent of a $400,000 home today for most people. So I don't know.
But they're not selling, right? The months of inventory is going up. They're not selling. There's a reason they're not selling, and it's because people
Because of TikTok.
Because of TikTok.
Aaron,
Because
is your
of
boss
love-
waiting for you?
What?
Is your boss waiting for you?
No, he is in a recruiting meeting, and so it's just my HR manager waiting for me. But I let her know I would be late.
Oh, well, that's. You
And I-
don't wanna
and I
mention
love that you
HR.
asked
You're
her
already,
that.
you're already a walking HR.
HR reports to me. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Well,
That's
isn't
the way
that
to do it.
interesting? Well, hey,
That's
that's
the
the
way
way.
to
Yeah,
do
that is the way to do it. You got it all figured out, man.
But I love
Um,
that every week you ask Erin about her meeting with her CEO. Every week.
I
you
I'm
ask
love
her.
that
concerned.
too.
I am
appreciates that.
concerned. I want to take care of Aaron.
Never,
Aaron is-
but never
let's
once,
be
never
honest.
once, Erin. Never once, Erin, has he ever asked me, "Hey, Cobe, what do you need to do after the show? Do you have anything going on?" Never once.
Well, Aaron is the
Just
glue.
just
to-
assumes
Aaron-
I can
Aaron
sit here
is-
all day long.
Yeah, she's the glue to no surrender. Plus, you have mice in your house. We know what you have to do when you get off. Have you eradicated the mice problem yet?
I have. It's not a. I live in my house is in the woods. There's mice. There's all kinds of stuff all around. I have a raccoon that I battle with on an almost daily basis. Like it's just that's just how it is.
Have you ever
I
had a
just like
snake?
imagine them with like a broom, like yelling.
I do yell at the raccoon.
Have you ever had a snake in your house?
No, thank God. I'd have to move.
That's like my worst fear is a snake coming up through the toilet.
I'd move that day. I would move.
Before we
I would-
go, Christopher Whalen, I'll call him a friend of the show.
Friend
Love
of the
it.
show.
Love that guy. Now I'm catching you off guard, Aaron, but you shared something in our epic text thread about DSCR loans and the issues in Baltimore now becoming more prevailing. Can you just give us just a little tea leaf on that, and maybe we'll cover it in more detail next week?
Yeah, basically high level. Baltimore last year had a big problem where a big investor group, I guess out of New York, came in, purchased a bunch of DSCR loans, essentially because these groups are picking these areas that it's hard to tell. There's a big difference in value from one block to another. So they're able to purchase them at inflated values. It's a kickback scheme, obviously, and now they're all going into foreclosure. And now this problem is seeping into Philadelphia, starting to see it in Newark. And so there's some areas, and these are some of the poorest neighborhoods in the country. So it's impacting these neighborhoods, obviously, with increased foreclosure. So I think it's worth looking into.
And at the same time, rents are going down.
In some markets,
places.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of places in the country, rents are going down, and the most prevalent non-QM loan is what? DSCR loans, and that's based on what? Rental income.
Mm-hmm.
This is not complicated. So I think
Doomer.
Yeah, we're
we're
really
gonna-
ending this on a high
I did
note.
it again.
Huh? Really ending this on the man who volunteered to lead the charge on positivity found a way to end the show.
I'm
on,
having
like,
a
the
problem.
most-
I'm having a real problem. I may have to go back to my therapist. I have
I'm
to
gonna
find
instead
one.
of a dunce cap, I'm gonna get a doomer cap.
Anything else? I love you guys. You guys are,
I love
you, the two of you are total stars. I'm so happy to be going along for this ride with you. I mean, I even had Denise Donahue, the mortgage nerd,
Love
tell
her.
me, even Denise Donahue said, "Oh, I didn't know you were famous. You're on that show with Erin Dee, who I love." She's basically
She's
telling me I was no one until I, hitched my
You're no
wagon
one.
to you, Erin. So I love hearing that.
Oh, she's the best. I love her.
All right,
Friend
Coby,
of the show.
any final thoughts? Yeah, she's a friend of the show now. We need to get like No Surrender friend of the show t-shirts.
That's true.
That's
We need some merch.
That right there is what we need. Who can help us with merch? Do we have any merch? We'll pay you. We'll pay you. We need a logo and we need some merch. We'll pay whatever the going rate is. We just can't do it ourselves.
The last thing I would put out there, and this is something that I want to speak out into the universe, is that at some point there is going to be a No Surrender live stage show at a conference near you. We are going to do this. It's going to be great. We're going to have a live audience, and we're going to rock it.
All right.
I
Love
can't
it.
wait.
Love Nayoung backstage for all of the buttons that she's pushing. They're all the right ones, Nayoung. We love you. All right. Another one in the books. I feel like everyone is the best one. This, again, met and exceeded expectations. Coby, Erin, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see everybody next Thursday on No Surrender. Until then, so long.
Peace out.
Bye-bye.
No surrender on the show. We go toe to toe. What's fair? What fails? Who gets the own?